Okay.
That was a good deal, right?
Let's hear.
She might be never born to.
Yes,
Let's go ahead and get started. City Management Services here for.
Okay. At our last regularly scheduled meeting, the council deferred a vote on the interlocal agreement with the City of Jacksonville and Jacksonville Fire Rescue until May 20th. But one of the things that you did at that last meeting was you wanted an opportunity to have a workshop discussion amongst the council to be able to ask some questions. And we also had set a time frame for the council members to get a list of questions to us as staff to try and get answers to as best as we could. The memorandum that I sent out to you on Friday of last week is a culmination of some clarifications. It is a listing of answers to questions that we felt staff in the city of Jacks Beach was best suited to answer. And it also included information, answers to questions that were provided by Jacksonville Fire Rescue Department. And that, those answers were also sanctioned by City of Jacksonville administration. So to just walk you through a couple things up front in the memo, and then to give you a little handout here as well for something else. But you'll notice there's a section in the memo that discusses supplemental information. The first topic in there is with regards to provision of ancillary services. I wanted to make sure that the council was aware that if it's not in the agreement, then it's not agreed to between the City of Jacksonville and the City of Jacks Beach. And that's specifically based on conversations that Karen and I have had with Sam Musa, the city administrator, and in terms of how they operate up in Jacksonville. The second issue is with relationship to the 911 cell phone call routing impacts. There was a lot of confusion as to what currently happens right now with 911 cell phones or cell phone calls versus landline calls, and what's going to happen in the future with regard to that. So one of the things that we did was try to explain in writing exactly what happens. If you could please take one down and pass it around. We tried to explain what happens with a cell phone call that goes to the 911 system and how it operates. So the graphic that you're each being provided with, there are 3 pages. The first page shows the current routing of calls as they are today. The second page shows what the routing will be when the 911 cell phone element gets the geocoding activated, which should be in about 6 to 8 months. Are we short one down there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then the third page shows what would happen to all cell phone calls, landlines, and cellular calls to the 911 system in the event that we were contracted to JFRD. So if there are any questions, would you like me to walk you through the graphics that you have in front of you so you can understand a little bit about what happens in the terminology of a primary PSAP versus a secondary PSAP? I see nodding of head. Walk you through it? Okay, it'll take 2 minutes to do that. So on that first sheet of paper, if someone calls 911, 2 different things happen. The first is if you're calling from a landline, your call is going to be routed to what's called the primary PSAP that your call is coming from geographically. And the primary PSAPs are all of the primary law enforcement agencies here within Jacksonville/Duval County. So you'll see going across from left to right in that beige box, you have Jacksonville Beach Police Department, JSO, Atlantic Beach, and Neptune Beach. So if you make a landline call for 911, it starts off by going to that police agency. The police agency will ask you the question, 911, what is your emergency? And depending on what the emergency is, they then either dispatch the police or they dispatch the appropriate fire department and for the fire and or EMS services that need to be provided. So that's how the landlines work. If you take a look at the middle line, you'll see the purple line that goes to JSO for 911 cell calls. Based on the fact that they've got the geocoding feature currently turned off because of some technical issues and compatibility with the cell phone industry, that function's turned off and all of the cell phones are currently routed to JSO. So when JSO gets the call from a cell phone and asks 911, what is your emergency, they may have to route back to a police department or route down to either JFRD or Jacksonville Beach Fire Department appropriately to dispatch the services that are required. On the second page,
Let me ask a quick question on that.
Yeah.
Is our response time from the time then, like when we say 4 minutes or however long, is it from the time once we get it from, let's say JSL, or when's our time start?
yes, we'll have Steve Shadow, interim chief.
No, the response times are just like with Jack's Fire. You've got the reaction time and the phone times and response times when the units are dispatched till they get on scene. You'd have to research other times and it'll pull the reaction time and those type of times you're looking for.
If you go to the second sheet, you'll see that in about 6 to 8 months, when the changes are made to the 911 cell phone module, all of the landlines and cell phones will go to the primary PSAP that they're supposed to go to. So that means if someone within Jacks Beach is calling from a cell phone, it will go to Jacksonville Beach Police Department, not go to JSO. And then our police department would dispatch accordingly. As you can see from the other lines that are on there, JSO, Atlantic Beach, and Neptune Beach all still go to JFRD for the appropriate fire and EMS dispatch because they're contracted for that service. The third page basically shows you what would happen under a consolidated or under a contract with JFRD. Basically, if Jacksonville Beach Police Department needed to dispatch both fire and EMS, they would use a push button feature to transfer that call from the police department back to JFRD as a secondary to dispatch both the fire and EMS function in our community. And then that would be actually consistent with everybody else that's in here, JSO, Atlantic Beach, and Neptune Beach. So everyone would be using the same methodology for receipt of calls and dispatch of calls.
So how does it work now if we need mutual aid? Who makes that decision? Which dispatcher will do it?
And Steve, if
The
you want to
incident-
explain mutual aid.
The incident commander, we use mutual aid, auto aid. When we get for a single structure fire, we're always having Jacksonville come with us, the auto aid. The written agreement is for one engine, but they send everybody their regular personal alarm assignment to us. So we're getting 3 engines, a ladder, a rescue, a RIT team. But the incident commanders, our standard dispatch for a structure fire, Jacksonville, we notify Jacksonville and they send all these other units with us.
The commander would ask for Jacksonville on site or before he dispatches?
If it's a house fire, automatically the dispatchers will be calling, just like they'll be paging the safety page for the off-duty guys. You can come in and things. So that's automatically a structure fire.
And is that currently from their nearest available unit, or is it particular?
It's however, and Jacksonville does like us, whatever units are available and not on runs, they're going to dispatch and send them. That's all based on who's busy at the time.
Has it ever happened where everybody's been busy and we've not been able to get assistance?
No, it's never. I mean, there's 50 stations in town. So yeah, you'll get whatever's available in their normal assignment, they're going to send to you.
But so do you, I'm sorry for going out of this, but can our guys go into the fire without Jacksonville's support?
Yes,
Is there
sir.
enough people on
Yes, sir.
site to go in?
Yes, sir.
So normally, their backup is just there as backup. They're not actually part of the active.
They're part of the active team when they get there. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, we practice 2 in, 2 out.
2 in, 2 out.
So we have to have a minimum of 4 people on site to safely go into a structure.
In Florida, 2 in, 2 out is the incident commander and engineer counts them 2 in, 2 out for the Florida.
So if we're running 2 on an engine, they can't do anything until the backup gets there?
Right, but remember the north end, they're coming with 2 engines in service. So there's your 2 and 2 and the incident commander there. So they're already 5 and that, so they've got the extra.
Does
Like
the
go into
response
fire.
time end when the first unit gets on site, or when there's enough people on site in order to be able to do the 2 and 2 out?
Do what now?
The response time that we're generating and tracking, those 4 minutes or whatever, is that based off of when the first unit gets on site, or when there's enough people on site in order
That
to be able
response
to-
time is based whenever the first one's there. I mean, since we only have 1 or 2 real fires a year,
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy for me to go and find out. But you'll see that second unit's on scene within that same, might be 15 seconds more, it could be. So it's not, but I can run that information for you if you'd like.
And each fire scenario may be different,
Right.
A single-story, single-family home is different than what might be classified as a 2 or 3 alarm fire, where you're pulling in even more apparatus because of the sheer size and the
It's
neighboring
whether-
properties, et cetera.
Exactly, whether you're doing offensive tech, defense, just depends on the amount of fire at the scene. And being so small and such a good fire marshal, we don't have any fire.
The next element in the memo talks about turnover in the Jacksonville Beach Fire Department. I think there were a couple statements made by the public that may have given the impression that turnover and employee retention in the fire department has been an issue for us, and the reality is it has not, based on the statistics that we've seen. There's also an explanation of mandatory overtime and staffing. I know that a little bit further on when we get into the questions, some of you asked the question, how many employees do we need to hire to eliminate overtime? And the reality is, well, you can't ever eliminate overtime. You can create an additional leave spot, which I think Councilman Gold was saying you asked about. But the reality is that if you have people who are out of service and they cannot fulfill their shifts, you will have a scenario where you're going to have someone come in on overtime. You can reduce the frequency of it, but to say you can eliminate it by hiring more staff is not really practical. We also talk a little bit about the shifts, the fact that we run a little bit of a hybrid with regards to shifts versus others that do 1 on and 2 off. And when we do have overtime, that does create an issue where we do have employees that on occasion will work 72 hours straight. 24 on an overtime shift, and then another 24, which is basically 3 consecutive days of work.
Is that you? Because there was emails going around a few weeks ago about a change. Was it like used to be
We could-
72?
We could change the way we operate, but my direction to the fire department was we're not going to make any changes in how we're operating until we know what the disposition of the department is.
Okay.
Because based on our interpretation of labor contracts, we would need to give appropriate notice to staff, which we anticipate could be anywhere from 90 to 180 days to change how we're operating. And we don't want to go down that road if we don't know where the future of the department lies at this point in time.
Okay. Thank you.
The next on there was with regards to NFPA. There were a lot of questions about whether or not NFPA were recommendations and guidelines, or was it an actual federal standard that we needed to comply with, otherwise we face some type of sanctions or retribution from the federal government. And the answer to that is no. NFPA is advisory. They are pretty much used in the industry. They're a guideline that a lot of people follow. But they are a nonprofit organization. At the end of the day, they are not a branch of the federal government, so to speak. And then the last section in the memo is with regards to city manager comments. I just wanted to touch on this again with regards to a possibility of a referenda and some of the issues that I see with regards to the current status of the fire department. I know that several members of the public came forward and said this needs to be put forward to a vote of the people. And in taking a look at when the next scheduled election is, it's just about a year away. And there is a possibility that there would be an election in November, and we could always do a special election if we so chose to. But with that being said, I think that as the decision point has gotten closer within the organization, the tensions between the unionized and the non-unionized employees within the department has ramped up a bit. And the longer that the situation goes without a decision being made, the more volatile it becomes in that environment. So you heard actually 2 relatives of firefighters step forward and say a decision should be made one way or the other sooner rather than later. I would concur with that sentiment. A decision does need to be made sooner rather than later.
And I appreciate you making that recommendation, because I think of all of the issues that we voted on. This is so complicated, and there's so much information that we've been given and provided, and perspectives that we could never communicate that thoroughly to the electorate. And this is something that we need to make a decision on. This is our responsibility.
From there, we jump into some attachments to the memo. There are a total of 5 of them. All of that was information that was provided by Jacksonville Fire Rescue. We had sent over a listing of questions to them. I take it back. The first one are the questions that you gave to staff that we provided answers to because we felt we were the ones best suited to answer those questions. And that goes from page 8 through 13, I believe. There is one correction that I have on page 12, and that's with regards to the date of reserve apparatus. That's shown as a 2003 Pierce pumper and a 2006 Pierce pumper, and I believe that's actually supposed to be 1993 and 1996 instead of 2003-2006. There was a typo there. And then that falls in line with our 25 years of total service for the vehicles before being surplus and taken out of the queue altogether, not even in a reserve status. From page 14 on is a summary of questions that were asked to JFRD, and they answered those, and they had everything to do with regards to the costs for providing additional units on the ground if the city so choose to go in that direction, all the way to providing response times for different engines within their service territory to kind of show you how they operate with everything from 2 square miles to as large as 16 square miles for service area. In discussions with Chief Kirk Wilson up there, he thought it was more appropriate to kind of give you the full gamut of what those response times look like, rather than try to just match up some apples to apples comparisons. And at the very end, we've got a couple of add-ons. One is performance benchmarks for JFRD, and then the costing that they did for both the ALS engine company and a rescue company, so you could see what the cost breakout was in the event that a third vehicle was something that you all wanted to have a discussion on. With that being said, we've got some resources here in the audience. Interim Chief Steve Shadow. We have Aaron Citrello from Dispatch, in case you had questions related to 911. And Karen and I, Karen has obviously been a linchpin in the conversations with the city of Jacksonville. And this is really your workshop. We're here to try and answer any questions that you may have in advance of the May 20th date.
I have a quick question for Karen. During the negotiations, were there things omitted? I'm not saying intentionally, but you know, a lot of things have come up subsequently, like emergency management, numbers, things like that. The contract we got just seemed to deal with minimum staffing and like the actual transfer. My question is, when you met with the city of Jacksonville those times, was it implied that the services would be the same? Are there things that you just said you didn't actually discuss specifically because you just understood it was just going to be the same?
We didn't discuss them specifically. We put some general language in the proposed agreement to address that they would be here on site for emergency management and would have personnel at our AOC to assist. No, it wasn't intentionally omitted,
Right.
but until we started having these bigger discussions and public discussions, you know, a lot of those details just weren't fleshed out until people started asking us specifically to see it in the agreement. And now we're trying to go back and flesh out the details a little bit more thoroughly.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that, and I'm just speaking for myself here, but a lot of people got frightened because of the lack of information. I assumed that because I know Jacksonville Fire Rescue are a professional organization, that I took for granted that their standards are going to be the same as what we're used to. But what I'm hearing from some of our residents is that they're afraid that they're not going to be up to par. Is there any reason why we should think that, or you know, during your negotiations with Jacksonville, did they come across as not going to be providing the same stuff as what we're used to?
No, not at all. I mean, Jacksonville has negotiated with us in good faith to put together this agreement. As for all of the details, like I said, it wasn't intentionally omitted. We're just, the more information we get and the more discussion we have, we're finding more and more questions that you all are asking that we're now taking back and getting additional answers for. And if you look at some of the responses from Chief Wilson, a lot of those particular questions about emergency management are answered.
Sure.
And Jacksonville has indicated that they would be willing to add additional language to the agreement.
Really?
to
Excellent.
address that.
Bottom of page 17.
That's important. That, I mean, that is important because I think what we're trying to do now is kind of give peace of mind to people. There's a lot of, I've talked to a lot of people for it, I've talked to a lot of people against it. A lot of people against it think that we're losing something, whereas a lot of people for it think we're gaining stuff. So I would like to see more in the contract specifics that just to give that peace of mind. I'm not saying go back to the drawing board here, but as you said, Chief Wilson said that we can include it. I think before it goes to Jacksonville Council, whatever we can include, we should. Just to give people that peace of mind that we're not being overtaken by aliens.
It would be our intention at the conclusion of this workshop tonight, and based on what we hear, to go back to Jacksonville with some of the things they've already committed to and ask them to look at incorporation into the agreement in advance of May 29th. Because again, as the old saying goes, if it's not in the agreement, it's not agreed to.
Exactly.
So the fact that they have agreed to put some of this into the agreement, it's just a matter of what does that language look like as it gets drafted and incorporated into it.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Nichols, you made the motion for the meeting. Do you have some questions or?
I mean, I think a lot of this was outlined, and I think we've got a lot of the questions answered. I mean, I was a little surprised that the cost to add one rescue out here was probably double what I was thinking it was going to be.
Yeah, when you and I had spoken about this, and where my experience was coming from, the rescues were provided by a private response company,
Right.
which meant that they were working 12-hour shifts or less, and they did not have the same pension liability associated with the positions. So in taking a look at the breakdown from JFRD, it looks like the rescues are actually staffed with sworn personnel, which means that it's going to be a higher burden rate to actually run the units.
My understanding is that JFRD had, the plan was to put another rescue in the south station, that's just what their plan was, and wasn't going to cost anything. Is that what you've heard? Has there been any more discussion about that?
I've not heard anything
No,
about
we
it.
haven't had any discussion about that. In fact, the agreement
Is what it
stipulates
is,
the
right.
one rescue that is at Station 1 now would remain at Station 1.
Okay.
Well, I think Mr. Wise is here. You represent the union. Have you heard of anything about?
There's a budgetarily has been a push to have a rescue unit in every station that Jeffrey covers. So I would say that there would probably be a big push in the end to continue with that push. And it's been a policy of the department for many years to try to get to that point as it relates to the areas that we covered. So I would definitely think that, and I would advocate for that. I've been advocating for that, to have more rescues. And I think that would be a great move. Would advocate for that.
But again, that is not in
Right,
this
exactly.
agreement. And there is a cost
And
this
if we
year
wanted to
for an
guarantee it,
additional
it's $1 million
rescue
a year.
unit, should we add one in the future.
Gotcha. But I'm just talking about things that have came up. Another thing I heard is that there may be a district chief brought out here. That's not in the contract.
Again, that's some discussion that we had with Jacksonville administration, but it is not included in this agreement because it's not, the funding has not been approved for that.
Okay. All right.
I don't think the department would look at it from an aspect of, we're only going to do what's in the contract. They're going to do what's right for the area that we cover.
But we can't hold them to that. We can't hold them accountable if it's not in the contract.
Correct.
No. You should only base your decision on what is there, but I'm telling you, the department's going to push for more than what's in the contract.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
But we can take it with a grain of salt. We can't make our decision based off of.
Absolutely not. You should not. Yeah, you should not.
But I mean, a lot of the stuff that I was looking for, it is answered within here, and it does show that JFRD is willing to, add language to try to add more detail to what we're doing to give a level of comfort to our city. My concern right now is the safety of our firefighters. I've got a concern with that, safety with our residents.
Safety
Not meeting,
for what reason?
our residents would not meeting the recommended standard that a lot of the other, for the number of people on the apparatus, that kind of bothers me a little bit. And just the safety of the firefighter from the amount of hours that they are working. And I mean, I know some of it is something that the union, and it's an agreed upon method of our shifts that we use and stuff, but you know,
Equipment as well, breathers and things like that.
yeah, but I mean, I feel like, you know, that the safety of the residents and our first responders are paramount in this decision. And, you know, a lot of people keep saying it's a monetary issue, and I'm not looking at the monetary portion at all. I mean, I want us to have a safe community, and I want our firefighters to be safe. So, but I'm pleased that the JFRD has given a lot of information and is willing to tie up some of the details and stuff that we have, and yeah, that's the main reason. And I guess response times, it's hard to project exactly what they're going to be. If they're going to be a little more, I mean, every call is different. I mean, you could go an extra 100 yards down the road. I mean, I'm sitting out here, and we got our engine stuck at this light for a minute and a half because it can't get through. I mean, there's a lot of things that impact our response times, but you know, I feel like what we're getting is at least equal.
That's what we say on the response time.
Yes.
That the 3 engines
Yes.
instead of the 2, because of that, when you start reducing, it adds to that. Just the parade, you know how busy it was out here.
Oh, yeah.
And we can separate and have them. And adding the extra rescue unit, well, that is it's excellent for the EMS because you've got that second transport unit. But on the other side, it's not the extra rescue unit, because that rescue unit is still going to respond with that engine. So you're still sending both. That's why the 3 engines set up is that way, because they can get there first, and they can, you know, they're all ALS engines, so they can stabilize the patient while they're waiting for that ambulance to come. I mean, we waited over 12 minutes the other day because everybody's busy. No problem with Jacksonville, it's just it was busy, and we get busy for some reason at the beach. We don't get one call at a time. It's like we go down the road, and the next one sees us. Oh yeah, I need rescue too. So they're called. I mean, it's just the way it attracts them. We get numerous multiple calls.
I mean, at the end of it, I mean, from the information they gave us, the savings that we would have if we did supply an extra engine that was fully staffed, you know, we would meet the recommended standards, and we just wouldn't show any cost savings. You know, I mean, I think we would have then that at that point in time.
I wanted to talk about that. So, what are we at right now to operate our fire department?
4.2.
Okay, 4.2 million. To add, it adds another $1 million if we want to man our staffing, man our engines in accordance with those standards. Based
Man,
on
our
your
current engines?
Yeah, man our current engines, which is 1 million. So that takes us to 5.2. And then I asked, due to the issues that we have in our department, I think based on all our discussions that's come to light, it would be necessary to probably add another leave slot, at least for my peace of mind and for the quality of life of our workers. So that's why I asked that question. And that was $325,000 a year to add an additional leave slot, so therefore they weren't tasked as much as they're being tasked. So now we're at 5.5 million to run our department effectively and in accordance with kind of what Jacksonville is proposing. But so now my question is, under the proposal now, how much with 2 engines is it for Jacksonville to take it over per year? What's the proposal? Is dollar amount?
2.2.
2.2. And then if we wanted to run an extra engine with Jacksonville, that would add 1.45 million to run the extra engine. So now we're at 3.6 is what we'd be paying. So really we're saving still, you're talking about losing savings.
No.
It's 5.5 million to 3.6 million.
If we're looking at apples to apples.
If you're looking at apples to apples, it's $2 million a year cheaper out the gate.
Well, I'm not sure we are looking at apples to apples. If you're talking about increasing our staffing per engine, we would be running 3 engines still. And the proposal is for,
It costs us an extra
He's saying,
1
but that is-
If you add
apples to
that back.
apples to have Jacksonville do it is 3.6 million. We don't change any service that we that it would be the same number of engines, increased staffing is 3.6 million is what it would cost us with Jacksonville to do it. For us to do it the same way would cost us 5.5 million.
To increase the staffing,
To increase
to
the
have all the additional
that's if we kept our current budget and added that. Right, you're right.
Which our current budget is what we determine is the cost to operate our fire department. So 5.5 versus 3.6, and then the discussion on decreased service is completely out the window, even under that, as far as the 3 versus 2. So even under that scenario, I think, I just wanted to talk about the numbers out loud because you had said, I've seen it still as $2 million in savings. Because in my opinion, we can't keep operating the fire department the way we are.
We're
There's
understaffed.
no question.
It's unsafe. It's unsafe.
Yeah, we need to do something. And I mean, the savings could go into policing, could go into anything else. It sounds like as well, like we're talking about adding engines, but like Randy said, I would prefer another rescue because.
But a rescue has to, an engine like Chief said, a rescue can't, a fire engine has to go with a rescue. So it's pointless to add another rescue.
It doesn't have to. You can do single dispatch, and that's something you could address.
With a rescue?
Right, because the majority of our
I didn't know
calls
that. Yeah, I thought they had to go
We
together.
can ask-
medical.
Doesn't have to.
Right,
Okay.
so the majority of our calls are medical, or low percentage fire. Obviously, we still need fire trucks, but it sounds like it would be better to have another rescue.
If Jacksonville would be willing, I mean, we'd have to put that in a
Put that in a
contract.
contract.
We'd have to pay for it anyway, because at the minute we have no rescues. So Jackson will provide one under the mutual aid, but if we're going that route, and remember what we talked about earlier about the population of the city increasing, greater demand for stuff, we know now that the fire department in its current form is on a very, very kind of skeletal crew. If one gets sick or if one wants to leave, there's problems. So, and that's our current rate of population. Once that increases, I think that we might even need one, we might actually need 2 extra.
So that takes us from 2.2 to 3.2 under this agreement, because it's $1 million for the rescue, but I would ask that you reach out to Jacksonville, because,
We'll ask that question.
and that exact question, Randy, because if they're willing to include that, then that would make sense, and it kind of, it alleviates us from having to spend money to have 3 guys. For the same reason you're running 2 mans on an engine, you can run 2 man in a rescue instead, versus saving $500,000 if we went that way.
We've had no actual population growth in the last 6-10 years. I mean, I don't foresee there being substantial population growth a little bit infill. If we put some living areas in the downtown. But with this contract, if we would as it is, and we had a agreement with JFRD, we already have the prices, that we track response times, and that we have an option to say, hey, we are not meeting the level of service that we have anticipated. We need one more engine, or we need one more rescue. I don't think we have to make that decision today. It really depends on, how, if JFRD is saying the way they're doing it is going to give us equal, let them prove it. If not, then we will, then we can make a decision and talk.
Yeah, and I believe you asked that question. That's number 2 on sheet 14. Can language be added to the agreement that would allow for the addition of a 3rd ALS-capable apparatus or unit upon notification from the city at a later date? And Jacksonville said yes, with an adjusted contract amount for associated cost. So whatever their average cost is per unit at some point in the future.
Sure.
So if 2-3 years from now, a certain type of development was occurring, and the council said they wanted to pull the trigger, we'd be able to pull the trigger at that point in time.
Well, I mean, the department would know itself anyway, because if you're in the weeds all the time, you're going to add more staff, correct?
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, to your point.
Well, let me
We'll get there.
That's not necessarily correct. And Mr. Weiss, I appreciate you being here, but our conversations with fire administration may be different than some of your understandings. The way the contract is written is that the level of service they're going to provide is the level of service they're going to provide. If additional resources are needed to meet demand, we will be asked to pay for those resources.
Yeah, of course.
So,
That's what he's at.
yeah, so, you know, if we're running with the, you know, with one engine, one ladder, and it gets to a point where it's not keeping up, Jacksonville's going to come to us and say, you need to pony up money for an additional unit in order for us to put the third one in place. They're not just going to start running the third and then say, you guys need to pay for us to do this. They're going to tell us up front, and they're going to expect that we pay for it. So it won't be a situation where we're constantly seeing a third unit out here. It'll be Jacksonville coming to us and saying, you need to pay for the enhanced level of service, and that's what's needed. That's why that language is very specifically written, that it was based on the current level of service and the conditions that we have today. If they change in that 20-year window, we absorb the cost.
And I hope they don't, but I am realistic. I know that there's no such thing as a free lunch, but I'm just saying that further on down the road, I mean, the numbers that they gave us now are based on, I'm sure, our current demand of population.
Correct.
And they deemed that an adequate number to be able to safely do business out here as a fire department.
Based on the geographical area, based on the population, and based on the location of the two stations, they feel that the two apparatus are what's needed at this time.
But I would tell you, they're not just looking at it in a vacuum. They're looking at it from the perspective of, by now covering this area, how does that enhance wherever else we respond to? Moving a chief out into this area makes sense for all the beaches and across the ditch. So they're not looking at it in a vacuum to only say we're only going to craft it inside the Jacks Beach boundaries. They're looking at it of enhancing the responses to all over the city. So, or this in this area. So it's I think it's just more outside of this contract. They're going to look at it from a perspective of how does it enhance all of the county.
One thing you want to look at is that third engine versus that second rescue. Remember, providing the rescue function is in the requirement of Jacksonville to do. So you pony up and spend and save a little bit, you're paying for a rescue unit that you don't have to pay for already. That's already part of the interlocal agreement. Services get that demand need. It's that engine that you lose that will be at the beach and things that serves that particular function. Well, that rescue unit, you know, would be a great addition also, but it's going to be across the bridge and other places, help pick up some of the load. They've got a county to protect. That rescue is already something that's paid for by the county. Don't spend the city's money on something that you would get.
Yeah, they're already covering that, you're
Right.
Back to that though, as far as providing the best coverage for the entire, you know, whatever is best for the service area. When a call comes in, are we looking at the Jacks Beach, Neptune Beach line to your knowledge? Because I did some Google mapping at different times of day, and there's parts of our city at the very north end that during certain times of day are going to be more easily accessed by the Atlantic Beach station. So to me, that's 3 fire stations on our island versus 2 in Jacksonville Beach. And someone who lives closer towards the north end, that's a consideration.
And one of the things that I will ask Randy the question, I'm presuming that where you currently contract with Atlantic and Neptune, those geographic areas are blended into response zones, or the TAZ, target area zones.
Oh, it would totally change the whole dispatch protocol and get more people here quicker, absolutely.
If you remember in the diagram still out there, we would become part of a run card system where you would look at the, yeah, it's still up there. Be jealous of my skills, don't worry.
Exactly.
You know, at that point in time, the zone for each station will get drawn geographically. So as opposed to Jacksonville Beach looking at having 2 stations to cover just Jacksonville Beach, the city of Jacksonville will say, how do those 2 stations fit into the entire geographic composition of all of Duval County? And then draw the lines accordingly. So you're right, there may be portions of North Jacks Beach where the run card may call for Atlantic Beach to go to that area first. And we may be the second response to go just because of physical proximity to get to that area. Or vice versa, the line might go a little bit further to the north. We may be going into South Neptune.
Our hardest area to get to is in St. Johns County and Marsh Landing. Remember, we cover a couple streets inside of there that we have to go through and back into.
So hard to get to that gate.
Jacksonville responds to Clay County on a daily basis. So there won't be any issue with a mutual aid response and automatic dispatch. We do it on a constant basis in all the other counties.
I'd like to just bring
No,
a bigger
Fort Clay, I was
issue
making an
up,
example
not the
that we do at
contract
Fort Clay. It wouldn't be hard
itself.
to do at St. John's.
I'd like to bring a bigger issue up, not just the contract itself. The issue that we have is not service. We have excellent service. Our issue is structural. So we're looking at trying to fix our HR issue, and we've got an HR issue. We've got one. We definitely have one. But just moving the boxes around and contracting it out doesn't fix that issue.
Well, we have
It
a
can help
quality, right?
alleviate it, but hold on. So it's kind of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I would suggest that we really look hard at how we fix our HR issue, because once this gets contracted, it's gone. We are not getting this back. When I was on the task force for consolidated government, I did on-the-road tours throughout the county. And I will say that the best attended meeting was here at the beach, and we were happiest with our services. The only issues we had were the ones that we got from Jacksonville. JFRD, I love you guys. You guys are great. That's not the issue. For me, it ends up being more the administration and the focus that the administration can place on our area. And so the fire department wants to do something, but the fire department's going to be under the mayor, and that's going to change with administrations. Let me go back to the on-the-road tours. The rest of the county, people really did not like their services. Not necessarily fire, but just in general, this county's response to a whole slew of things, our quality of life. And that's something I kind of take heart to. And that was even when they were meeting, there was a lot of apathy. We go back to Jack's Beach and what we're looking at doing here. I would suggest that we fix the HR issue. If we fix the HR issue, we get the morale back up, I would suggest that we have some kind of conflict resolution there, possibly hiring more. But this is the nuclear option, contracting it out. There are many things that we can do as a city to fix a lot of the issues. We get to keep our control over it. We're not going to be as hitched with Jacksonville any more than we already are with the interlocal agreements. And anyone who's been on council or paid attention to the county Beach's relationship over many years knows that whenever there's a new administration, there's always a steep learning curve. What is it that they're supposed to be providing? How much of it? There's just a loss of knowledge because there is no city manager in Jacksonville. They have the chief administration officer, who also is going to be very new, and so there's going to be a learning curve there. It's not going to be anymore. But when a new mayor comes in, that whole apparatus changes. So we have to look at that larger picture and how that's going to impact us. Right now, we have a beautiful control and say over how everything is going on in the city. I don't think that we should, because of HR issue, that we should be willing to give that up so easily. Like I said, once this gets contracted out, we are not bringing this back in-house. And a lot of the arguments that I keep seeing that are made for why we should contract this out, it could be made for police, it could be made for 911, it could be made for public works, all those things. In 1968, we decided, you guys can consolidate, we want to stay separate. And I went through way too many hours really looking at the consolidation of the county and the cities. I know a lot about it, and I can say that we have a unique thing here, and the more that we give away, it's not going to really benefit us in the future. But we have an issue. We have an HR issue.
Yeah, I mean, Neptune and Atlantic Beach also had the same outcome in the 68 vote as we did, but they've contracted with their fire department, and I'll just let me finish off a second. I've talked to people from there, and they seem very happy with their service. So, saying it's an HR issue, yes it is, but that's just part of it. We can throw money on it to fix it, but why should we? We're not getting, I think there's this, why are we demonizing the 7th biggest fire department in the country? I mean, I don't think it's really going to affect our life.
Nobody's demonizing JFRD.
A lot of people, excuse me, a lot of people have. And you've got the emails and you've been at these workshops. Remember, we reached out to them. They are not, this is not a hostile takeover. The previous city manager wanted to give good service and save the taxpayer money. That's what I want. I know that's what you want. You want our residents to be as safe as they can and have the lowest taxes. I just think that a lot of times we can get caught up in nostalgia and think, well, just because we have our fire department means we need to keep it. If it was working fine and we weren't having this discussion, you know, there wouldn't be an issue. But there is an issue, and I think HR is one part of it, but I think it's bigger than that. We're beholden on Jacksonville now as a secondary entity. If they can help us, they will. I would prefer to be in a contractual, an agreement where they have to help us first. We're not just secondary, and that's where it's back to front now.
No, that's not mutual aid.
If Jacksonville has a call before us and they have to send their apparatus out to that call, if they can help us, they will. They don't have to help us first. Whereas if we have a contract, they're our fire department. They're not Duval's, they're ours. So that's where I see the difference. And I really don't see it, you know, you mentioned about giving away the police department, public works, things like that. I don't see this as any type of erosion of our identity. And it's just because it's work with Neptune and Atlantic.
I think you have a valid point if JFRD didn't do our rescue. So JFRD responds, everybody talked about how great the service is out here. You went to the beaches meeting, which was the beaches collectively, and everybody was happy with their service, which would mean Atlantic Beach, Neptune Beach is happy with their service. I would 100% agree if we had our own department that handled all of rescue and fire collectively, and we were happy with it, and we needed to spend more money to keep it up, that would be a valid argument. But the point is JFRD responds to 100% of our calls. They already come to every call. So we collectively, to the HR issue you're talking about is why I asked the questions that I asked. It cost us about $2 million more to effectively run the police department the way that Jacksonville's running theirs. And we've been penny pinching to save money, and kudos to George for saving a bunch of money. But now it's come to a boiling point because we tried to save dollars and save dollars and save dollars. So instead of being $4.2 million a year, it's going to cost us $5.5 million to run our fire department. $5.5 million for 4.2. So we're going up from the 4.2 that we're currently spending. So the question is it worth us to keep the fire department with our name on the thing, with our name on the side of the truck? Is it worth spending, increasing the dollars in the 5.5 million to keep them? I mean, that's essentially the question, because we would spend 3.2 for the same level of service from Jacksonville. Same number of trucks, same number of staffing, 3.6 million. So $2 million cheaper, Jacksonville would run it the same way that we would, for $2 million a year. So is that an effective use of our tax dollars?
I wouldn't look at it as just keeping your name on the truck. It's a lot more than that.
Why is that? Because
Do you really think it's really just keeping your name on it?
the same employees are going to be there.
No, and that's a whole different thing. They're not all going to be there.
If we operate the additional fire truck, the same employees would be there because we would be bringing on nine positions.
But the rankings all but drop down, and so you're going to have the people on the upper. There will be people who will be shifted off of the beach.
And we have people,
And when we look
that
at,
want to leave.
when we look at the emergency response, we contract with Jacksonville to bus them to the hospital. They show up on scene, but it's our firefighters who are there doing the first aid and that immediate response, as well as the rescue. The rescue is really get them to the hospital or where they're stabilized. But our firefighters are the ones who are there. Just like in Jacksonville, the firefighters are the ones who are there and they stabilize the situation. So I think that part gets lost in the rescue. We're thinking that it's, whenever it's a medical thing, it's just the rescue that's doing the stuff. That's our firefighters.
Agree, 100%. But the same individuals would be doing it. I'm on board if individuals, everybody that I've talked to that sent us emails, I've called dozens of people. Every conversation that I had, if we had the same level of service and saved money, meaning 3 fire trucks, every single person I talked to, with the exception of one, said that we should keep our fire department. With the exception of one. I've called at least 20 different people that have sent us emails that said with a no vote. The only people that I really haven't called is Pablo Towers. I haven't talked to anybody from Pablo Towers.
Can you repeat that again? Because just repeat what you said.
So I got all the emails of everybody voting no, keep the department. keep our
Keep the
fire
department if we can staff it the same,
If-
as opposed to
Well, no.
contract.
So they emailed and said, no, vote no on the merger.
Right,
So I
that's what they
called
said
those
originally,
individuals
right.
and said, well, let me phrase this a couple ways and ask you to give it some consideration. Here's what we're left with. And like Ms. Hoffman talked about, we have so much information. Every one of those phone calls, the shortest one was probably 30 minutes because you had so much to talk about that people didn't know or whatever. But at the conclusion of each of those calls, I kind of left with the decision of if we had an opportunity to keep the same number of fire trucks, because most of the people that voted no, that were a hard no, said, well, you're losing a fire truck, so we might have increased response times. I said, I completely agree with that. That is very much a possibility. I said, if we still saved money, but had Jacksonville doing it and running 3 trucks, every single person with the exception of one said, I'd totally support that. And we're talking over 20 of the no votes that have emailed us and said no to the merger. It's not a hard decision, in my opinion, when you look at it from a numbers perspective and the issues that we're having, the HR issue that we're having. We're not just throwing it out. We're not just giving it, like Mr. Doherty said, we're not just giving it to some department that has no idea what they're doing. They already run the beaches. They already run half the beaches.
Keith, you mentioned in your discussion with Georgette that they didn't come to us, we went to them. Who's we?
City of Jacksonville Beach.
The
Well,
city of
Ja-
Jacksonville Beach?
I think his name, George Forbes, was the person that went to Jacksonville.
8 years ago, 7 years ago.
Well, Karen probably answered it.
7.
2012.
Wasn't it out of an agreement with the union? So it wasn't the city, it was the union requesting that we look into contracting with Jacksonville.
Well, it depends how far you want to go, because this is probably been going longer than my time. I hear it's been going on for 20, 30 years, so I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg. I just know in this whip around, George contacted Jacksonville. So,
This go around,
because this has been an ongoing issue for years, before we were on council. So,
Mr. Stepopoulos, where you came from, tell us about the fire department there. Did your community have its own fire department? Tell us a little more about it.
Our community had its own fire department.
How many people, how many stations?
We had over 100 employees. We had 4 stations that were ours, 2 which had multiple apparatus because of the population density and the number of ALFs that we had in the community, and 2 stations that we operated contractually. One for an area called the High Point District, which was half city, half unincorporated county, and another one where we took over fire service for the city of Bel Air Bluffs and its neighboring town of Bel Air. They were a 1-station department with 1 apparatus, 3 on an engine, and we ultimately took it over because they couldn't financially support it on their own.
You had 100 employees for 4 stations?
No, we had over 100 employees for a total of 6 stations, 2 of which were contractual, 4 of which were ours. But we ran multiple units. Our main station at 41 had a ladder, an engine, a rescue, and another technical unit that went out for extrications and other types of events. The community there was vastly different than what you have here in Duval County. There were, I think, a total of 13 fire departments throughout all of Pinellas County. Some of those were 1-station departments for small communities. And some stations did okay and others ran into financial difficulties. And they are still struggling with financial difficulties today. I know that 2 of the 1-station departments have now started discussing a merger because the overhead costs to have a fire chief and all the administrative support over 1 apparatus sitting in 1 engine just doesn't make sense from an economics perspective. So they were looking to try and create alliances and see where they could share a fire chief, a fire marshal, captains, etc., in order to oversee the operation. So when you take a look at it here, 2 is probably about the smallest that any fire department can really survive on, and even then it is difficult from a financial perspective. One of the things when you look at the numbers, a lot of people say, how can Jacksonville do cheaper? And part of the answer is they don't have the same overhead structure Not only is it one less unit, but it's also, the overhead structure isn't there to run an entire department. The chief is already in place. The fire, all the other positions that they have are already in place. So where we have to have those positions independently, they're already covered under a different overhead structure. So that's a little bit about where I came from. The issue of,
Did they meet the PA standards?
some did, some didn't.
And you don't have a concern about?
Most of them had 3 on an engine, but occasionally they would run 2 if they had to. If they, this department's so small, if you only have 1 engine and, 12 to 18 employees, if someone's out and you can't get the shift covered, you're running 2. And there's nothing you can do about it. And all of those departments relied on mutual aid for the purposes of fighting a fire and for the purposes of redundant calls in their community. That was kind of a status quo. All 13 fire departments in Pinellas had mutual aid agreements because the boundaries were all up next to each other. Some of those communities were as small as Neptune Beach, and if there was ever any type of incident of significance, those communities relied on their neighbors to help them. It was just a matter of fact. For us to take over the one station department in Bel Air Bluffs made all the sense in the world. And we had provided them contractual services for about 5 years, up until the point that I departed under agreement that I had negotiated with them.
What was your experience with morale there with
Within-
your fire departments?
With what?
The morale with your fire departments?
If you have some dice and roll them on a table, that's about how consistent they were. If you were to Google the City of Clearwater Fire Department, you can probably find 5 major incidents over the last 5 years. The fire department where I came from was in relatively good shape, but they did have some morale issues based on a previous chief that had been in his position several years ago, and the morale went downward based on that chief. There were some other communities where they have extremely poor morale, and some that have very good morale. It fluctuates, it ebbs and flows. I can't really speak. Each department is unique with that with regards to what their issues are.
My concern is that there hasn't been ebbs and flows in Jacksonville Beach. I think George Bush made a decision that this was going to happen 6 or 7 years ago and try to save every penny along the way. And I think that there's a big problem and we need to get a resolution.
Why is there a big problem?
With just from an HR level, and I think that running the 2 mans, I think we need to staff up, and I think we need to be more. I think we need to do more to make sure our residents are safe. But mainly from an HR standpoint, I think that there's been an ongoing issue. I mean, just from raises and stuff. I don't think that they have recently received a raise. We raised property taxes in order to give them a raise. But prior to that, when was the raise they received prior to that?
2 years prior to
But,
the beginning of this contract. Pardon me?
there was discussion, when we negotiated collective bargaining agreements with the police, and we're trying to negotiate with the fire at the same time.
Yes.
And that didn't happen because this was made the priority for the union, is that correct?
Negotiations were delayed, yes.
Okay. So, and, when Mayor Curry started the problem in Jacksonville, and we saw an increase in finances paid for the police and the fire, we knew we had to do the same in order to make it consistent. And we started that process with the police pretty quickly, but the fire department made it very clear that they didn't want us to do that until this issue had been resolved.
So it's not pay then? Pay is obviously part of it. I think.
Well,
we're talking about conditions. We're talking about the raises with the fire department.
Well, we're talking about, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying, so from the fire department, from the union's perspective, if they're saying they wanted to negate raises to explore this merger, it's not a financial reason, because they're also talking about their working conditions, the equipment we provide for them, and the fact that we've already determined that they're on a pretty slim staff level. So I think, I'm not speaking for Corey, but the way I look at it is if we're not going to merge, we really need to be diligent about bringing our department up to a point where it can be autonomous now, not having to depend on Jacksonville, because that's what it seems like it is. We're just beholden to them, and really, like Phil, when he went through the numbers, we can still have everything we've got, but pay half, almost $2 million less. I find it hard to actually figure out a reason not to do it, based on the service, based on money, based on morale, based on the coverage we're going to have. I mean, I'm yet to be convinced otherwise, as opposed, other than we're keeping our own fire department, which to some may be very important, but to me, service and low taxes are the normal thing. That's just the way I see it. So.
Okay, anybody else got any comments they need to make tonight, or?
Steve, are we beholden to Jacksonville right now?
I don't
Is
understand
that
what
what
you
you
mean
said?
beholden to.
Yeah, because it seems like I think every call that's dispatched, Jackson will show up.
50, I'd say probably about 60%, because they have to send the rescue units. But that's their countywide requirement. They have to do that no matter what in there. But it was 69% of rescue calls, of those that actual true rescue calls. You can lower it just a little bit. You said 100%. It's not 100% they show up on, because we have all the other calls in between there. So they probably show up on close to 70, around that 60%.
67%.
You know, which, remember, they have to on one no matter what is there involved in it. Remember, our units, they respond with them to, we go to Atlantic Beach and Neptune Beach with them on calls, just like we go down to St. Johns County now. So that interaction is there.
So we don't.
Every department's going to do that.
We don't need them really. No.
Sure, they need us too for those other areas, because they're short engines in there.
We're not going to 70% of our calls.
No, we're not going to 70%
Right.
of it.
So,
But we're not, remember, they're not coming to 70% of ours because they want to. The rescue, they have to.
Yeah,
so if we get our own rescue, then we don't need Jacksonville.
No, let me clarify that. If you go back to the countywide authority, the City of Jacksonville / Duval County, the City of Jacksonville has the responsibility for EMS for all of Duval County. And they are the authority that provides for the rescues across the entire district. That is one of their obligations as a county. If you take a look at it, I believe it's the 1982 interlocal agreement. It even lists that they are responsible for the medical transport. So that's a county obligation. It was the same way in Pinellas County, where I came from, where the county was responsible for EMS, but everybody had their own fire departments. The fire departments went there first as the ALS, Advanced Life Support, to stabilize the patient, while the transport was en route to get there, do the handoff, and ultimately take them to a medical facility if necessary. So what Mr. Shadow is saying is that, you know, if we got rid of our fire department for whatever reason, Jacksonville would always have the rescue at Station 1, because it's their obligation as a county to provide that service. 69% of our calls, I think, is the actual number. 69% of our calls are medical related. So even though there's only one rescue, we have 3 engines, and that engine is going to make the first call. So if there's an issue with a resident down in South Beach, the engine's leaving Station 2, it gets to the person. If the rescue here is unavailable, they will go down and meet our engine. If that rescue is tied up, we may need to wait for a rescue to come from another part of the county to meet our fire engine on site, do the handoff, and then transfer the patient to the appropriate facility if it's necessary for them to go. So I think that's where Steve was saying before. It's great that we have a price for a rescue, but we would need to confirm with Jacksonville that the rescue could be a primary responder as opposed to just following up to where an engine has responded to. So they would actively be dispatched as a first call as opposed to a second call to back up an engine. And if they could do that, that would be an additional option and benefit to the city of Jax Beach from a contractual perspective.
Okay. And Randy, you said that's in the works, or,
No, it can be done. We've done it in the past.
so, but it's something we would need to add language to for this?
We need it as contractual language that if a second rescue were added that we were paying for, it could be an initial dispatch unit as opposed to a follow-up for an engine.
But on top of that, I would add that for the cost of the fire engine, they're an advanced life support unit. So you get basically the same, you get double bang for your buck from an asset. It's a suppression unit also, carried water hose, things like that. So you get a better bang for your buck for an ALS fire engine as compared to a rescue.
Sound forward. Thank you.
I had a question about the, in the Exhibit C, it talks about the ranks and the transition over, the lieutenants and captains will transition over as suppression engineers, and the engineers and firefighters will transition over as firefighters. So will our guys that lose, guys and girls, because I know we have some females too, will they have the opportunity to try to get their rank back? Or the minute this contract is signed and the transition happens, all those, I mean, the way I read this, we've got 30 people that have ranks, so there's going to be 30.
There will be 28. There will be
28
28 total going over in the transition.
Okay, so that means there's
Disagreement.
28,
There
there's
will be
28
28.
promotions that will then become available. Will our people have an opportunity to try to obtain one of those promotions, or is it pretty much no?
No,
out of the
they
picture?
will, under the collective bargaining agreement that's currently in place in Jacksonville. We also address in this agreement seniority. The officers, the captains and the lieutenants will retain their seniority, so 1 year for every year that they're a captain and 1 year for lieutenant. For the firefighter engineers who are going to firefighters, it's time of grade or length of service. So they will each receive credit for length of service, and that length of service does come into play in their promotional process.
It'll give them an advantage actually over the Jacksonville firefighters as it relates to future promotions.
Future
But that's
promotions,
future
not the
promotions, so that's not, so in other words, we'll have our lieutenants and captains that are gonna, they're currently doing lieutenant and captain jobs, and they're gonna be engineers, and somebody else is gonna come in, because we'll need lieutenants and captains, and that's the reality, correct? Because they're not gonna be able to try to obtain their rank immediately at that point.
Right.
They will be eligible for promotional tests as those promotions become available.
Okay.
But they will not be demoted and then immediately receive a promotion back up to a rank to fill a vacant slot.
Well, no, I
Within
mean,
one
I guess my
year.
question is because when those slots become open, I know the Jacksonville firefighters are gonna have an opportunity to move into those slots. So my question was, would our people have an opportunity at that time to move into those slots too? But that's not the case, apparently.
Well, for the ones that are here for the slots that are here at the two beach stations, so as an example, our lieutenants who would get a demotion down to firefighter engineer,
Yes.
Engineer, just engineer.
to engineer.
Suppression engineer.
Suppression engineer. They would likely be given the first availability to fill suppression engineer slots that are here in Jax Beach.
But not a captain or lieutenant slot that's now available because of the transfer.
Correct.
Right.
They would all be receiving a demotion of either one level or two levels as part of the transfer.
Financially, what does that translate?
Mayor, the answer to your question is they will not have a reduction in pay in the transition. They will be brought in, but if a captain is brought in, he will be brought into the suppression engineer pay grade. He will receive a supplemental pay or an additional pay to make up the difference between where he's coming into the pay
In
scale
perpetuity?
and what he was making.
They'll be the highest paid engineers on the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department.
Until such time as the pay scales are increased or
Or
adjusted,
they
or
promote
that
up.
he's promoted up. So he will stay at that pay with the supplement. He will stay at that pay until the pay scale allows for the adjustment.
So there's no raises for that example? There would be no raise for many years until the pay
Unless
schedule?
Unless they promote or
Jacksonville
the
pay
ranking
scale
goes
is
up.
adjusted or or he gets promoted up.
We have a 7% pay raise coming October 1. That'll eat up a whole lot of it immediately.
So just rank, it's not pay? That's exactly.
In the transition, that's correct. But that doesn't, doesn't determine how long we'll be at that rate of pay.
In correlating like a small department that we have and a large department, the career path of a firefighter, I'm assuming it's quicker from a larger department because you've got more opportunity to move up. How quickly does somebody move up through the ranks here in Jacksonville Beach versus JFRD?
I'll give you an example of ours. We had a 2-year promotional list, and we just promoted the entire list, plus 3 people in a 2-year period. And that number was 246 people, or 246 engineers promoted in a 2-year time frame.
And how often in Jacksonville Beach do our guys receive promotions?
In the last 3 years, there were 4 promotions. You got to look at his percentages math. There's 1,000, so you're saying when you take the percentages down, all right, they have, 10%.
I kind of want both. I want the numbers and the percentages because you can make them each say whatever you want to say.
Well, as the chief said, it gives the people coming over a much greater opportunity of promotion than they have now. Huge.
You're competing, it's 10 people competing for a slot of 2, or 200 people competing for, a slot.
Oh, no.
We promoted almost everybody off the last list. Almost everybody.
I understand that. I'm concerned with them taking a step
No, we're
back.
talking engineer going up.
Taking a step back. I am concerned with everybody having to take a step back in rank, but.
To the chief's point, we promoted we're not done yet, but almost 70 lieutenants, which is the people that are coming in as engineers, that is their first step.
And that's what he said, you got to remember.
In a 2-year time frame.
The rank class, engineers, it's because you have more of them, it's easier to promote them that.
But
then they go from lieutenant and it starts dropping.
Right.
And the pool gets in there. So it's, like.
70 lieutenants in the last 2 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Going once?
Gives them a better opportunity
Going twice?
to come up.
Okay, thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is adjourned.
Engineer, they just got.
No, I meant that.